I had always prided myself on being fearless. Ghost stories? They were entertaining at best. Haunted houses? My friends would tremble in corners while I laughed and poked fun at the dark. I spent my childhood testing my courage in ways that would make my parents sigh in exasperation. Midnight dares in the cemetery across town, exploring abandoned buildings with nothing but flashlights, and laughing at horror films so gruesome that my classmates refused to watch them. Fear, to me, was a curiosity, a joke I could master. It wasn't until the week of the school trip that things began to change. It was a rainy Thursday, and our history teacher reminded the class about the upcoming excursion to the lakeside retreat, a 3-day adventure that promised canoeing, hiking, and ghost stories by the fire. Most of my classmates squealed with excitement or mild anxiety, but my mind wandered elsewhere. I remembered reading about seances, Ouija boards, and rituals that supposedly summon spirits. The idea fascinated me, not because I believed in it, but because it seemed like the perfect way to prank my friends. I shared my plan immediately with my closest companions. I would buy a Ouija board, and once we reached the retreat, stage a real ghostly encounter. I wanted to watch their terrified faces, their exaggerated screams, and perhaps get the satisfaction of knowing that even the bravest among them would falter. Most of them laughed, dismissing it as another one of my elaborate jokes. But one of my friends, Alex, gave me a serious look. "You're seriously going to bring that thing? You know it's not a toy, right?" he warned. "Relax," I said confidently, grinning. "It's just a board with some letters, nothing else." By Friday afternoon, my plan was set in motion. I ordered a vintage-style wooden Ouija board online, complete with a planchette and a small, odd-looking instruction booklet. The moment it arrived, I ripped the package open like a child on Christmas morning. The board smelled faintly of old pine and varnish. The instructions, written in curling, archaic text, contained long paragraphs of cautions and rules, but I skimmed through them quickly. After all, I had nothing to fear. That night, my younger siblings noticed the board. My youngest, Emma, wrinkled her nose. "Do we really need that in the house?" she asked. "Relax, it's just a prop," I said with a laugh. But when I glanced at their faces, I noticed something strange, a flicker of unease, subtle but undeniable. I ignored it. Saturday morning dawned with a crisp chill, and I was practically vibrating with excitement. I wanted to try the board immediately, even if only to familiarize myself before the trip. Alone in the kitchen, I placed the board on the table, positioned the planchette, and read through the instructions again. The guide warned of restless spirits, of entities that could attach themselves to those who disrespected the ritual. I scoffed. "Fairy tales," I muttered to myself. I started the session precisely as instructed, a polite greeting, calm questions, and patience. I waited. Nothing. Hours passed. The planchette remained stubbornly still. Eventually, I sighed and said my goodbyes. The board was no more than a wooden toy. I felt victorious and slightly bored. That evening, my parents and siblings went to the cinema, leaving me alone in the house. Normally, this would have been perfect. Alone time was my sanctuary. But just as I was scrolling aimlessly on my phone, a loud crash erupted from the kitchen. My pulse jumped, not out of fear, but surprise. I ran to investigate and found the kitchen in disarray. A container of old orange juice had exploded inside the trash bin, splattering brown liquid everywhere. I laughed nervously. "Classic physics," I muttered, reasoning that the buildup of gases must have caused it. I cleaned up the mess, dismissing the incident. But later, when night fell, something shifted. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating. That night, sleep betrayed me. My dreams were fragmented, chaotic, and horrifying. I saw shadowed figures moving in ways that defied human anatomy, their whispers unintelligible but filled with menace. Blood appeared in streams and puddles, its presence both vivid and overwhelming. I jolted awake, heart hammering, and glanced at the clock. 2:47 a.m. Something was wrong. I wasn't used to nightmares, let alone ones that left me trembling hours after waking. And yet, as I lay there, I sensed a presence in the room. My eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight spilling through the curtains, and I thought I saw the outline of a girl perched on my suitcase, her head tilted unnaturally, staring at me with eyes that seemed too deep to belong to a child. Beside her stood a tall, dark figure. I froze, trapped by disbelief and terror. I pulled the blankets over my head, convinced I was still dreaming, yet every instinct screamed that I was awake. Counting fingers, attempting to rationalize, trying to reason, it did nothing. Pure, unfiltered fear consumed me. Finally, I decided I had to act. On the count of 3, I would jump from the bed and turn on the lights. 1, 2... But my body betrayed me. Pins and needles shot through my legs as if my limbs were asleep. On 3, I lunged, heart racing, and flipped the switch. Nothing. The room was empty, yet the air felt wrong, charged with something I couldn't see. I didn't sleep again that night. Morning brought little relief. Even in daylight, the room felt wrong. Shadows clung to corners as if reluctant to leave, and the air seemed colder than usual. I couldn't shake the feeling that the figures from the night before were still there, watching from some hidden corner. Every creak of the floorboards or gust of wind pressed on my nerves like invisible fingers. I tried to distract myself by packing for the trip. The Ouija board went neatly into my suitcase, tucked under clothes as if that would contain whatever had been awakened, but every time I glanced at it, a cold shiver traced my spine. Something about it didn't feel like a mere board. Something about it felt alive. That night, I attempted sleep again. I turned on my fan, tried to drown the silence with music, but nothing worked. And then it began. Subtle sounds at first, almost ignorable. A faint whispering from the corner of the room, the softest scratching along the walls. My pulse quickened. I told myself it was the house settling, the wind, my imagination, but deep down I knew it wasn't. By 2:50 a.m., I could no longer pretend. The air thickened and my room felt smaller, more oppressive. And then I saw them. The girl perched on my suitcase, her hair hanging in uneven strands, head tilted unnaturally to one side. Beside her stood a tall, dark figure. I froze, trapped by disbelief and terror. For what felt like hours, I lay beneath the blankets, praying the sun would rise sooner. I tried to calm myself with rational thought. It's a dream. I'm awake. It's not real. But when I heard the faintest shuffle, the barest sigh of breath that didn't belong to me, my resolve shattered. I couldn't even cry. My body had surrendered to fear completely. Finally, I forced myself to act. I counted again, 1, 2, 3, and jumped from the bed toward the light switch. Flick! Light spilled across the room. Nothing, no figures, just the suitcase, innocuous and wooden as ever. My chest heaved. Relief came only in shallow, shaky bursts. but the relief was fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. I stayed awake, huddled under my blanket, willing the morning to arrive faster. But when it did, I realized something worse. My fear hadn't left me. It had anchored itself, settling into the corners of my mind. The school trip came and went, uneventful in comparison to my home nightmare. Canoeing, hiking, campfire stories. I laughed along with my friends, keeping the events of the previous nights to myself. The Ouija board remained at home, which I didn't regret. It felt like leaving a dangerous animal in its cage. But the relief was temporary. Returning home, I stepped into my room, and a chill gripped me immediately. Something felt off. Objects were slightly out of place. A book had slid from the shelf. A chair was angled oddly. I shook it off as absent-mindedness, but my stomach tightened. My mind screamed that the Ouija board's influence hadn't left me, that it lingered in the space, invisible yet potent. Nighttime at home brought no peace. My dreams returned with a vengeance, darker and more vivid than before. I was no longer merely a witness. I felt trapped within them. The girl's tilted head, the tall man's shadowed presence, they appeared not just in my dreams, but everywhere. In the flicker of streetlights outside my window, in the corners of darkened rooms. Blood, incomprehensible violence, whispers that pressed directly against my eardrums. They had become part of me. By now, even small lights could not soothe me. Darkness, once comforting, was now a source of terror. I began sleeping with multiple lights on, doors cracked open, even leaving the hallway lamp lit so that no room felt truly empty. But I knew that the figures didn't need darkness to exist. One evening, as I was tidying my room, a loud thud echoed behind me. I spun, expecting a book or a lamp to have fallen. Nothing. Heart racing, I approached my mirror and froze. The reflection didn't move the way it should. For a split second, the tall man's shadow appeared behind me, impossibly still, his gaze fixed on my reflection rather than me. I blinked, and he vanished, leaving the room empty, yet the fear remained. From that moment on, every creak, every whisper, every flicker of shadow became a potential threat. I couldn't focus on anything for long. My schoolwork suffered, I avoided friends. Even my younger siblings seemed wary of me, as if sensing the tension that now radiated from me. Weeks passed, but the feeling of being watched never faded. I couldn't sleep in total darkness anymore. Even with a nightlight, shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should, twisting unnaturally across my walls. I tried everything to reassure myself: music, television, even staying in other rooms, but nothing helped. The sense of presence clung to me like a second skin. Then, one evening, Emma, my youngest sister, came to my room looking pale. I can't sleep," she whispered, hugging her knees to her chest. I tried to console her, but I noticed a strange rigidity in her posture. Her eyes darted to corners of the room I didn't even see. "What's wrong?" I asked. She shook her head. "I keep seeing them. That man and the girl. I see them sitting at the foot of my bed. I see them staring at me at 2:50 a.m. exactly." A cold chill ran down my spine. My heart raced as I realized it wasn't just me. The figures had crossed over into her perception. Somehow, they had followed the Ouija board's influence into the lives of everyone near it. That night, I insisted Emma sleep in my room with me. At first, it was comforting, but even with her there, the unease persisted. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. I lay awake, listening to faint whispers, soft scratches on the walls, the subtle creak of furniture moving under invisible weight. Suddenly, a sound like anything I had ever heard erupted from the corner of the room, a metallic scrape followed by the dull thud of something heavy landing on the floor. I bolted upright, heart hammering, but the room was empty. My eyes fell on the suitcase, the board inside. My stomach turned. The planchette had moved. It wasn't just lying still. I grabbed the board instinctively, feeling its strange warmth radiating through my hands. A deep sense of dread filled me. I had ignored the warnings, laughed at the instructions, and now it demanded something in return. The next day, I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe it was gaslighting my own mind. Maybe Emma's fears were a projection of mine. But as night fell again, I could no longer deny reality. The room became alive with presence. Whispers grew louder, forming words I could almost make out. Shadows stretched unnaturally, curling and twisting as if the walls themselves were breathing. And then they appeared. The girl sitting on my suitcase, head tilted in that impossible angle, eyes unblinking. The tall man standing perfectly still, emanating an oppressive silence that pressed against my chest. I froze. Emma whimpered beside me, clinging to my arm. The girl's eyes, hollow and empty, seemed to pierce through the wall of reality. My rational mind screamed that it wasn't real, but every nerve in my body insisted otherwise. I couldn't take it anymore. I ripped open the suitcase, pulling out the board. My hands shook as I stared at it, the planchette quivering as if it had its own life. A thought struck me. I had to destroy it. I stuffed it into a plastic bag, sealed it tightly, and told my mom to throw it far away from the house. She hesitated, giving me a concerned look, but agreed. Watching her walk out with the board felt like watching a weight lift off my chest. Relief surged through me, but only partially. That night, I slept with the lights blazing, huddled on my bed, trembling even under thick blankets. Every creak of the house made my pulse spike. I tried to pray, tried to will the fear away, but it lingered, stubborn and pervasive. School resumed and life returned to something close to normal, except for me. Sleep remained elusive. Darkness became my enemy. I could no longer be alone in my room. My parents eventually moved Emma into my room temporarily so I could feel safe, and I kept a small nightlight on permanently. One day, I nervously mentioned the board to Emma. She looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. "Since that day," she said, softly, "I keep having dreams. I'm always in a large, empty room with a giant clock. At exactly 2:50 a.m., the tall man and the girl appear, sitting on the floor, staring at me. I can feel them looking straight through me, into my mind." My stomach turned. The haunting hadn't ended with the board's removal. It had left a residue, a scar on our lives. My own terror felt minor compared to hers, and yet I knew the danger had once been real. Somehow I had invited it into our world. Somehow it had chosen us. Even with the Ouija board gone, the presence didn't leave. My room felt right every time I entered. Shadows pooled in corners, unnaturally thick. Sometimes I would glance at my bed and see faint outlines, like lingering impressions of the girl and the tall man. I tried to rationalize it, tried to convince myself it was anxiety or imagination, but the fear had become part of my daily life. One night, as I lay in bed with the nightlight casting feeble circles of warmth, I heard it again, soft whispers, low and distant at first, then growing louder until the air seemed to vibrate. I covered my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, but it followed me. And then I saw her again, the girl seated on the edge of my bed, hair hanging in uneven strands, head tilted. Her hollow eyes locked onto mine, freezing me in place. The tall man appeared beside her, silent, imposing, radiating a suffocating stillness. Every muscle in my body screamed to move, to run, but I was paralyzed, unable to act. I tried to speak, but no words came. The room was alive with their presence, their attention unrelenting. The fear became unbearable. I could barely focus on anything during the day, haunted by flashes of their figures in reflective surfaces, in shadows behind closed doors. Schoolwork went undone, friendships strained as I isolated myself. Even simple tasks, making food, walking through the house, felt dangerous. Emma confided that she had begun sleepwalking, wandering into empty rooms and staring at invisible figures for minutes at a time. Her once bright eyes were dull with fear. My heart ached as I realized I hadn't just endangered myself, I had dragged my sister into this nightmare. I knew there was only one solution left: confrontation. I needed to acknowledge whatever had been unleashed and attempt to sever its hold on us both. One evening, I sat in my room, lights dimmed but enough to see, with Emma sitting silently beside me. I placed my hands over the space where the board had been, imagining it still there. I spoke aloud, my voice trembling but determined. I don't know what you are. I don't know why you're here, but I'm not afraid of you anymore. You have no hold on us. Leave this house, leave our lives now. At first, nothing happened. The room was still, the shadows unmoving. Then a cold gust of air swept across the room, rattling the curtains and sending chills through us both. A faint whisper, almost like a sigh, drifted through the air, and I felt a presence shift away from the corner of my room. For the first time in months, silence returned. The air felt lighter, less oppressive. Emma exhaled shakily and leaned against me. I didn't sleep easily that night, but for the first time, I wasn't paralyzed with fear. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal. Emma's sleepwalking ceased, and her nightmares became less frequent. I still kept a nightlight on, and my parents allowed her to share my room for a while. Shadows seemed longer than they should, but they no longer held the oppressive weight of the figures. Yet, a part of me knew that what we had encountered hadn't entirely disappeared. The memory of their hollow eyes, the suffocating stillness of the tall man, the eerie tilt of the girl's head, they were etched permanently into my mind. My own courage, once boundless, had been replaced by vigilance. Fear had finally found its mark. I learned a lesson I had scoffed at for years. There are forces beyond our understanding, and some doors, once opened, leave traces that linger. Even now, whenever the clock strikes 2:50 a.m., I feel a chill run down my spine, a subtle reminder that some things, once invited in, never truly leave.